Russia invades Ukraine as the president of the UN Security Council. Should Russia be kicked out? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. By now you probably already know what's going on in Europe.
The latest Russian bombardments had hit yet more homes, injuring the very civilians the Kremlin promised had nothing to fear from what it calls a targeted attack on the Ukrainian military.
The Russians have arrived in the capital. Gunfire heard in the shadow of St. Michael's Golden Dome. Residents told to shelter in place after alleged Russian soldiers were killed while wearing Ukrainian uniforms. Civilians taking up arms and on patrol as they're warned they no longer know who is on their streets. At the central station, mayhem. Thousands trying to cram into carriages, hoisting their children onto the train.
Since last week, Ukraine has been fighting for survival against the onslaught of invasion from Russian forces. And as you can see, footage of the conflict is taking social media by storm.
Уже штук 20 пролетіло. Самолет, ёпта.
Memes have become a new front in information warfare. People have been sharing incredible stories of Ukrainian resistance, like this person who stood in front of advancing Russian tanks, or this Ukrainian woman who confronted Russian soldiers with sunflower seeds.
Вы пришли на нашу землю. Какого хера вы пришли с оружием к нам? Возьмите семечки, положите сырыми, чтобы хоть подсолнухи росли, когда вы здесь ляжете.
If Russian leader Vladimir Putin expected Ukraine to be a pushover, he sorely miscalculated. Although in some ways Putin's miscalculation is understandable. After all, in 2014, Ukraine's military suffered a catastrophic defeat against Russian-backed separatists and Russian military forces. At the time, Ukraine's military was chronically underfunded. It had huge problems with corruption, outdated or non-functional equipment, and even getting fuel for military vehicles. It was so bad that Ukrainian children held bake sales to raise money for troops. Yeah, if you're funding your military the same way I funded my school field trip to Six Flags, that's a bad sign. And while Ukraine has built their military up since 2014, they're still outgunned by Russia. So Putin didn't think Ukraine's military was a big threat. But that's not the only issue. Putin has also succeeded with every military action he's launched, whether against Georgia in 2008, Ukraine in 2014, or Syria since 2015. The Russian military has repeatedly converted battlefield successes into political victories. Putin has gotten away with it every time before, so why would it be different now? Especially since Ukraine's current president was once the voice of Paddington Bear. Turns out Paddington is not as soft and fluffy as we remember. After Russia's invasion, President Zelensky refused to evacuate Ukraine, saying, "I need ammunition, not a ride." But while that sounds like a line from an action movie, this is not an action movie. There's very real human suffering here. As of this recording, Russia has started shelling Ukraine's second largest city. Ukrainian refugees are pouring into Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. And much of the world is denouncing Russia's aggression, including Russian civilians and celebrities. You know things have gotten out of hand when even the Taliban calls on Russia to show restraint and resolve things peacefully. Yeah, the Taliban. The invasion came under the guise of what Putin called a special military operation, seeking demilitarization and the denazification of Ukraine. Okay, can we all agree, calling people Nazis is seriously jumping the shark at this point? Now the funny thing is, Russia's invasion of Ukraine happened just as the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting trying to dissuade Russia from sending troops in the first place. Now, whoever is in charge of the UN Security Council must be pretty incompetent. What's that, Shelley? The president of the UN Security Council when Russia invaded Ukraine was Russia? Maybe they should be called the Insecurity Council instead. The UN Security Council is the most powerful organization within the UN. It has primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. Its job is to identify acts of aggression and try to help countries resolve issues peacefully. However, the Security Council can also impose sanctions and authorize the use of force to maintain or restore international peace and security. The Security Council is made of 15 seats. 10 seats are for UN member countries that serve 2-year terms on the Council. 5 of the seats are permanent. The permanent members are the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. So free countries and authoritarian regimes. And France. Why these 5 countries? They were the winners of World War II. Each permanent member has the power to veto any resolution the Security Council is trying to pass. And needless to say, Russia and China make sure the UN doesn't do anything they don't like. Now you might be thinking, this is insane! Russia and China, 2 of the biggest threats to world peace, controlling the organizations that's supposed to ensure world peace? You wouldn't be the only one thinking that. During the Security Council's emergency meeting, the Ukrainian UN ambassador blasted Russia for whitewashing its attack on his country and violating the UN Charter calling for peace. He also brought up an interesting question. Can Russia legitimately hold on to its position as a permanent member of the UN Security Council? More after the break. Welcome back. Now earlier I said Russia was on the UN Security Council, but that's not technically true. When the United Nations was founded back in 1945, it was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, as one of the 5 permanent members. The USSR, or the Soviet Union, wasn't Russia. It was a one-party state consisting of Russia and 14 other republics. But that doesn't exist anymore, except in the hearts and minds of millennials. But the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 obviously raised a major question. Who would take the Soviet Union's seat in the UN Security Council? There really was only one historical precedent: China. The original country listed was the Republic of China. That government was overthrown by Mao Zedong's communist forces. He established the People's Republic of China, while the Republic of China government fled to Taiwan. For decades, the Republic of China in Taiwan still held its seat on the UN Security Council. Until 1971, when the UN General Assembly voted to recognize Mao's China as the only legitimate representative of China to the United Nations. However, there was no vote to give Russia the Soviet Union's seat. Russia's first president, Boris Yeltsin, basically just sent a letter to the Security Council saying that's what was going to happen. International lawyers have questioned the legality of this, and have debated whether the dissolution of the USSR should have dissolved its seat at the Security Council. And you know who agrees with that? Ukraine. Ukraine now argues that with the Soviet Union completely dissolved, Russia should have had to reapply for admission to the UN like the rest of the former Soviet republics. Yeah. While all the other Soviet republics had to reapply for membership to the UN, Russia just took the most powerful position in the UN. So the question is, can anything be done about it now? More after the break. Welcome back. Russia has launched a bloody invasion of Ukraine. And it did that while holding the presidency of the UN Security Council. But now, the US Congress wants to oust Russia from the Security Council. Although that's a bipartisan resolution, that still needs to be voted on. And even if Congress did vote for it, a resolution is non-binding. So it's just a statement of Congress's opinion. And the US Congress has no power over the United Nations. The UN would have to agree to kick Russia out of the Security Council, which means Russia would have to agree to it. And China too. And I don't think either of these guys are going to approve of something that would take away their power. I feel like there's a flaw here somewhere. Just getting the UN to formally condemn Russia is hard enough. A UN Security Council resolution against the invasion of Ukraine was already vetoed by Russia. What a surprise. Although the Security Council did approve an emergency meeting of the UN General Assembly over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's the first emergency session held in 40 years. Of course, Russia voted against the emergency meeting, but since it was a procedural vote, they couldn't actually veto it. So, yay for technical UN bureaucracy? So what can the UN General Assembly actually do to stop Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Well, they can vote on a resolution, one that's similar to the one Russia vetoed in the Security Council. But since no one has a veto in the General Assembly, Russia can't stop it. So this resolution will probably pass. So, what will the resolution do? Well, UN resolutions are non-binding, so nothing. It's just an expression of the UN's opinion. But that's still important according to the US and its allies. Even though it's unenforceable, it's supposed to show Russia that other countries disapprove of its invasion of Ukraine. The point is to show Russia that it's going to become increasingly isolated politically around the world. But because of Russia's position in the UN can only express its opinion. So that opinion has to be backed up by actions outside the UN, like sanctions from individual countries that are going to have a real effect on Russia's economy. One of the reasons Putin's previous military operation succeeded was that he never received much effective pushback. Sure, there were some sanctions in the past, but a lot of European countries rely on Russian oil, so they didn't want to go too far. Nobody treated Russia like it was North Korea. But now that's changing. The question is, will Putin care? So what do you think of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Is Russia about to become a pariah state? Leave your comments below. And if you like the show, please know we could not do it without direct support from viewers like you. Visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered and contribute $1 or more per episode to help us keep the show going. So click the link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.